Welcome to the deep dive. Ready for a trip back in time. Today,
Back in time.
yeah, way back.
Yeah.
Like to 1250 AD.
Okay, I'm game. Where are we headed?
While London was happening across the Atlantic, there was this incredible city.
Oh, you mean like the Vikings?
No. This is even earlier. It's right here in North America, Cahokia.
Cahokia. Huh, most people haven't heard of it.
I know, right? It's amazing, though. Cahokia was actually bigger than London at the time.
Wow, okay. That's pretty impressive. And this,
Man, get this. It was centuries before any European showed up.
we're talking about a seriously ancient American city.
Totally. And we've got some really cool sources to help us figure it out. There's Wikipedia, of course.
Naturally.
And the Cahokia Mounds State Historic Site website, which has a ton of info. Oh, and I found this really interesting YouTube video.
Always good for a visual.
Yeah, and a live science article that digs into some of the mysteries.
You mentioned mysteries. What kind of mysteries are we talking about?
Well, everything from these massive mounds they built.
Mounds. Like burial mounds.
Well, some were for burials, but others were for, like, ceremonies and stuff. And some are, like, 10 stories high.
10 stories. Wow. Okay, you've got my attention.
There's even evidence of possible human sacrifices.
Oh, wow. Okay, this is getting intense.
And some people think the whole city was designed to align with the cosmos.
Cosmic alignments. This is going to be a wild deep dive.
I know, right? So, picture this. It's 1250 AD. You've got 120 of these mounds, some huge, some smaller, spread out over 6 square miles.
That's a pretty big city.
Yeah, Cahokia was the biggest pre-Columbian city north of Mexico.
I had no idea.
Oh, yeah. And with a population of maybe 20,000 people.
So pretty bustling. And they built all this
All with woven baskets.
woven basket.
Can you imagine?
Hold on. They moved how much earth again?
Like 55 million cubic feet of it.
That's insane.
It's crazy, right? And no bulldozers or anything, just like pure manpower and organization.
Speaks volumes about their society.
It really does. And the location wasn't random either. They picked this spot right where the Mississippi, Missouri, and Illinois rivers all come together.
Ah, smart. Control the waterways, control the trade.
Exactly. And the sources talk about these trade routes that went all the way from the Great Lakes down to the Gulf Coast.
But they weren't just builders, they were connected.
Major networkers. And it wasn't just like, practical stuff they were trading. The sources mention things like copper from the Great Lakes and Mill Creek chert, and even shark teeth from the Gulf Coast.
Shark teeth. What were they doing with shark teeth?
That's a good question. We'll have to see what our research says. But the point is, these weren't just goods. They were symbols of this massive network, this exchange of ideas and culture across the entire continent. So we've got this bustling city, trade routes, skilled builders. What was life actually like for the people who lived there?
Well, from what archaeologists have found, it seems like Cahokian society was very organized, very structured, and very spiritual too. Yeah. They had these planned neighborhoods all laid out around plazas and mounds. It suggests a hierarchy, maybe even a kind of social order.
And what about the art? Those long-nosed god maskettes and copper earrings you mentioned.
Right, the craftsmanship is incredible. And those weren't just pretty things. They were probably used in ceremonies, rituals,
Yep.
It gives you a glimpse into their beliefs, their cosmology.
Okay, that's fascinating. And then there's that game they played, Chunky.
Chunky!
Yeah, it's like this disc-rolling game.
Sounds fun.
It was, but it was also super serious.
Serious? How so?
The YouTube video said people would gamble on it, like big time. Some even bet their lives.
Wow, no pressure then.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But it shows you how important the game was to them. It wasn't just about fun. It was about, like, social status and maybe even destiny. And speaking of destiny, the layout of the city itself might hold some clues to how the Cahokians saw the world.
Okay, how so?
Well, they didn't just throw these mounds up randomly. Remember Woodhenge?
Woodhenge. Like Stonehenge, but made of wood.
Exactly. It was this massive structure made of timber, like a giant calendar. And it was perfectly aligned with the solstices and equinoxes.
So they were tracking the movements of the sun and the stars.
Yeah, they were pretty sophisticated astronomers, and some researchers even believe that the entire city, all the mounds and plazas, were laid out to reflect their understanding of the cosmos.
Like a giant map of their beliefs.
In a way, yeah. It's like they were trying to connect the earthly realm with the celestial. Makes you wonder what those ancient astronomers were thinking, right? Mapping out the stars and building their city in harmony with the heavens.
They obviously saw a deep connection between the physical world and the spiritual.
Absolutely. And that connection might be a key to understanding why Cahokia eventually disappeared. Because by 1400 AD, it was abandoned, gone.
Vanished, just like that. And we're not totally sure why. It's a huge mystery, and one that we're going to try and solve today. Yeah, Cahokia's decline. That's the real head-scratcher in this whole story. It's like we have all these pieces of a puzzle,
but we can't quite figure out how they fit together.
Exactly. And some of those pieces, they're pretty dark.
Yeah, we can't really talk about Cahokia without talking about Mound 72.
Mound 72.
Yeah, that's where they found evidence of human sacrifice. Mass burials.
Okay, that takes a turn. That's a far cry from those beautiful copper artifacts and carefully planned neighborhoods.
I know, right? It's almost like a completely different side to Cahokia. But within that same mound, there's also this burial they call the Birdman.
The Birdman.
Yeah. This guy, he was buried on a bed of like 10,000 shell beads, and they were all arranged in the shape of a falcon.
Wow. That's elaborate.
And get this, near his grave, they found all these super rare arrowheads, like from all over North America. It's like a snapshot of their trade network.
It's pretty amazing, but it also raises a lot of questions. Like, on the one hand, you have these mass sacrifices. Maybe it was part of their religion, or maybe it was about social control. Who knows?
Yeah, it's definitely not something we condone today.
Of course not.
Yeah.
But it's important to try and understand it within their cultural context.
Totally agree. And then on the other hand, you have this incredibly elaborate burial for this one individual, clearly someone important, someone powerful, with all these symbols of wealth and status. So what does it all mean?
Right, that's the big question. What was the role of sacrifice in their society? And what does it tell us about how they viewed life and death?
Big questions. And maybe those sacrifices, maybe they're even connected to the city's decline. Did they like increase over time? Did they become more intense? Could that have been a sign of, I don't know, social unrest? Or some kind of a response to a crisis?
It's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
And those arrowheads found with the Birdman, those are a good reminder just how far Cahokia's influence reached. Remember, those arrowheads came from all over. The Great Lakes, the Gulf Coast, everywhere.
Yeah, it really puts the scale of their network into perspective.
They weren't just a city. They were a hub, a center of trade and culture for a huge chunk of the continent.
Okay, so we've got this thriving city, this amazing culture, then poof, it's gone. What happened?
Right. Why did they abandon Cahokia? For a long time, the leading theory was environmental collapse. You know, the classic story of a civilization that overused its resources. Maybe there was a massive drought.
I think I remember the YouTube video mentioning that theory.
Yeah. But more recent research has actually challenged that idea. It turns out there's not a lot of solid evidence to support it.
Yeah, the Life Science article talked about that. They said there's no clear sign of widespread crop failures or anything like that.
Right. And some archaeologists even think that the Cahokians might have been pretty good at managing their resources. They might have had irrigation systems or ways to store food for times of drought. Who knows? Maybe the flooding that we see in that area today wasn't as bad back then.
So if it wasn't the environment, what else could have caused such a dramatic collapse?
Well, one possibility is disease. A city that big, that densely populated, it would have been a breeding ground for outbreaks, especially without modern sanitation.
That's a scary thought. One bad plague and that could be it.
It's true. And it's a good reminder that even the most advanced societies are still vulnerable. Another theory is internal conflict. Remember that social hierarchy we talked about?
With the Birdman and everything.
Yeah. Maybe those power structures, they became unstable. Maybe there were rebellions or even a civil war. Imagine different factions fighting for control, resources becoming scarce. The whole fabric of society starts to unravel.
It's like a slow motion collapse from the inside. And you know what's interesting? None of the sources we looked at mentioned any oral histories or legends that explained Cahokia's decline. It's kind of weird, right? You'd think an event that big would have left a mark on people's memories.
It is strange. It's possible that the stories were lost over time, passed down through generations, and eventually the details just faded away. Or maybe the reasons for the decline were so complex, so multifaceted, that there wasn't one clear story to tell.
Yeah, it's like trying to explain something that you don't even fully understand yourself.
Exactly. And it shows us that even with all the evidence we have, there are still things about the past that will always remain a mystery.
Makes you feel pretty small, doesn't it? Trying to make sense of something that happened so long ago.
In a way, yeah. But it's also incredibly humbling. And even without all the answers, investigating Cahokia is still incredibly valuable. We learned so much about these people, their ingenuity, their culture, the challenges they faced.
It's a reminder that even the most impressive civilizations, they're not invincible.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about what makes a civilization thrive and what can lead to its downfall.
Right. And it's important to remember that a lot of Cahokia's history was actually destroyed before archaeologists could even study it.
Yeah, I remember reading about that in the Wikipedia article, all those mounds that were leveled to make way for roads and farms.
It's tragic. Imagine all the knowledge that was lost.
And you know, it's ironic. It was actually a highway project that led to Cahokia being rediscovered. They were building a highway in the 1950s, and they accidentally uncovered part of the site. And that forced archaeologists to come in and excavate. And that's what eventually led to Cahokia becoming a National Historic Landmark and a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Talk about an accidental discovery. Sometimes progress can lead to preservation. Who knew?
It's a good reminder that we never know where the next big discovery might come from.
And that we should always be looking for ways to protect these fragile pieces of our past.
You know, hearing about how Cahokia was rediscovered by accident, it makes you wonder, could there be other lost cities out there, like buried beneath the surface, waiting to be found?
It's an intriguing thought, right? And with all the new technology we have, like ground-penetrating radar, it's becoming more and more likely that we'll find them. Imagine unearthing a whole new civilization, a hidden chapter in human history.
That would be incredible.
It's exciting,
Yeah.
right? And it just shows how much we still have to learn about the past.
Okay, so we've talked about Cahokia's rise, their culture, their mysterious decline, and the importance of preserving their legacy. What other cool details about life in this ancient city did we find in our research? Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about their impressive buildings and their vast trade networks, but I'm curious about the everyday lives of the Cahokians. What did they eat? What were their traditions like?
Well, their diet seems to have been pretty diverse. They grew corn, of course.
Makes sense. Corn was a staple for a lot of Native American cultures.
Right. But they also hunted deer and fished in the rivers. And they gathered wild plants and nuts from the forests. So, you know, a pretty balanced diet.
Not a bad life, right? Living in this sophisticated city, eating fresh food, playing chunky in the plazas.
Speaking of chunky, there's something kind of unsettling about those games that I wanted to mention.
Oh yeah, what's that?
Well, remember how we talked about how seriously they took it? How people would gamble their possessions, their social status?
Yeah, even their lives in some cases.
Exactly. It wasn't just about winning or losing. It seems like chunky was connected to something deeper. Maybe even their beliefs about fate or destiny.
Wow. It's like the game was a reflection of their whole worldview.
It's possible. And it makes those high-stakes games even more intense. Like they weren't just playing for fun, they were playing for their place in the cosmos.
It's mind-blowing to think about, and it makes you realize just how much we still don't understand about Cahokia.
We're really just scratching the surface. Every new discovery just raises more questions.
It's like the more we learn, the more we realize how much we don't know. Which I guess is part of the fun of it, right? The mystery keeps us coming back.
It's what keeps archaeologists digging, literally. And for anyone who's interested in Cahokia, my advice is this: don't be afraid to ask questions.
Good advice. Even if there aren't always clear answers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the search for answers, that's what keeps the story of Cahokia alive.
And what a story it is. A city larger than London, flourishing centuries before Columbus, and then gone, vanished.
It challenges everything we think we know about history. And it reminds us that even the most advanced civilizations are still vulnerable to disease, to conflict, to the unknown.
Cahokia might be gone, but it leaves behind an incredible legacy. These mounds that still stand, the artifacts, the stories, and the mystery.
And as long as we keep asking questions, keep digging, keep exploring, the story of Cahokia will continue to inspire and amaze us.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's been an amazing journey, and I have a feeling our listeners are going to be doing a lot of their own research after this.
I hope so. And who knows, maybe some of them will even make the trip out to Cahokia and see those mounds for themselves.
Nothing like experiencing history firsthand. Well, a huge thank you to you for sharing your expertise with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
The pleasure was all mine. And remember, the story of Cahokia, it's still being written. Every new discovery adds another layer, another chapter. So stay curious and keep exploring.